So after the release of Vicarious Vision's Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro, they decided to make a sequel, but not for the PlayStation 2, but for the Game Boy Advance. Going from a console to a handheld was definitely an interesting decision. So based off this decision, you can assume that this game was substantially worse, right? Well, I'm happy to tell you that is not the case. So since this was a handheld title, going into this game I kept my expectations in check. I was under the assumption that this game would be absolutely terrible, but to my surprise, this was a quality Game Boy Advance game. At its core, the story is pretty basic for this game. You start off with a conversation between Peter and Mary Jane where she asks him to buy her a new fishbowl for their fish. As he leaves to go and buy the fishbowl, he sees TV reports of criminal activity happening downtown. In addition, the police won't comment on if the events are connected or not, so, to nobody's surprise, we take off immediately, throw on the suit, and go put a stop to these crimes. Now this is when we are shown the map, which displays each level that you can go to by moving from dot to dot, each representing a different place. You go through 7 different levels, with each having you face a villain at the end in order to complete the stage. Now let's start off with the first level, Downtown. Immediately from the first level, I noticed the beautiful colors and environment. For a Game Boy Advance game, this looks surprisingly good. I knew from the comic book style cutscenes that the game would be colorful, but I didn't think it would look this great. But still, we move forward from rooftop to rooftop while fighting different enemies. The devs did a great job at making Spider-Man flexible with his movements, as you can jump and punch, but if you hit the down or up button and then press attack, Spidey will perform different attacks like a low leg kick or a leaping kick. In addition, you can shoot webs using web fluid. What's cool is that you can angle the shots in the way that you want them to go. So if the enemy is above you, you can shoot your webs up, just adding more ways that you can kill the enemies. The enemies are a lot more aggressive than I expected, as if you get close to them, they perform melee attacks that are hard to dodge from close range. In addition, these Mafia-styled enemies use guns and can shoot you from long range, always keeping you on your toes. Since there was Mafia guys all throughout this level, it was no surprise that we fight Hammerhead at the end of the level. During these boss fights, I recommend using everything at your arsenal to defeat these bosses because they're pretty tough. Hammerhead stands at a distance while performing a couple of different attacks, which include using his gun, using his head as a battering ram to run through you, and calling henchmen to come kill you. After finishing this fight, we get jumped by more of Hammerhead's men as he flees to the nightclub. For a first level, I thought this set the tone of the game really well, and the story was intriguing enough that it held my attention. So we go to the nightclub to hunt down Hammerhead, and which is easily my favorite level in the game. We start by talking to this civilian that lets us know that mobsters are holding some hostages within the club and we need to free them. When we enter the club, we start in a different part of the building where we encounter the Mafia thugs once again. As we continue forward, there are doors that we had to go through, which would lead us to more enemies that once we killed them, it would free the hostage in the area. The actual club itself looked cool, with all the different colors blending together to create the perfect club aesthetic. One thing worth mentioning is that you have to pay attention when you're in these levels, because if you don't remember where you went previously, you'll keep running in circles as you search for the exit to move on. After freeing all the hostages, we fight Hammerhead once again. Just like the last fight, he has the same attacks with him shooting the gun, running and charging, and calling henchmen. After putting a stop to him, we find out that someone hired him to move some laser transmitters. Now that Hammerhead was stopped, it was time to move on to the next level, Pier 54. This level was similar to the first as we had the Night City background, but we were closer to the actual city streets. The enemies were muscular thugs who weren't carrying weapons, but could perform quick melee attacks that could cause some serious damage if you're not careful. This level featured sections where there was water on the ground, so you had to be careful when swinging across when trying to get to the next area. Here's when I realized how useful the other suits were. If you searched high and low throughout the levels, you could find power-ups that were actually suits that would make the combat so much easier. At the end of the level, we fight Rhino, who was tricky as he would constantly run from side to side, trying to ram you or slam the wall, inflicting damage to you as you fall down. Once I started jumping over Rhino, I was able to hit away and end this fight. After his defeat, we pull Rhino out of the water and find out that Rhino was just distracting the cops so a shipment of crates could be delivered to the museum. Once we realize that Rhino doesn't know much, we go to the museum. Similar to the nightclub, when we enter the museum, we have to travel through multiple doors in order to find artifacts that will lead us to the final boss. This time the enemies changed, as they weren't normal thugs but they looked like armored thugs that carried guns alongside ninjas. If you defeated the yellow ninjas, their bodies would dissipate and drop an artifact. Once you had acquired all 5 artifacts, it was time for the boss fight, Scorpion. Now here is when the boss fights really started to ramp up in difficulty. During this fight, Scorpion would move around constantly and attack using his stinger, which was really hard to dodge. He just kept hopping from one side of the room to the next, so when I was able to close the distance, I made sure to attack as much as I could. After a bit of a struggle, we defeat Scorpion and find out that he was expecting a shipment from the docks, and in return, he would receive the tech he needs to get out of his suit. After opening the crates, we find a holographic projector and move on to the 5th level, Empire Medals. If you made it this far, then by now you probably know how this goes. Travel up and down, go through the arrow doors, and find the boss. This level took the traversing to an even higher level, as there was fire on the ground that could kill you if touched, and started having enemies placed on top of certain objects that made going from place to place a huge pain. The enemies were more of the same too, with them being ninjas and thugs with guns. The boss for this level was a surprise, as it was Big Wheel. His fight wasn't hard at all, as you could just stand at a distance and hit him with your web blast, as his wheel is so large it's almost impossible to miss him. After spamming the web blast, we defeat this villain and find out that he was just a distraction so that the power core at ChemCorp could be fully drained. After hearing this, we head straight to the next level, ChemCorp. I didn't know what to expect entering this level, but after finishing this, it's safe to say that this is by far the hardest level in the game. The formula is still the same. You still have to find exits throughout the level to progress, but this time you have to go all over the place in order to find out where to go. This stage has you constantly going up and down, crawling all over objects, and being forced to swing across very narrow spaces to continue forward. The most frustrating part was how there are sections where you have to swing up and under spaces to avoid electrical circuits which would electrocute you, making you fall down and lose some health. There are multiple sections like this in this level, and it took me so many tries to finally get across. After a lot of struggle, we finally get to the boss, Electro. This fight wasn't too difficult, as you just needed to run up on him and close the distance quick. If you let him hover around, he will go on top of the platform and zap everything or make electric shockwaves on the ground. After taking down Electro, we learned that all the villains were just gathering parts to create holographic transmitters that created illusions across the city. After putting the pieces together, we realized that Mysterio is the one behind all the crime that has been happening downtown. Knowing this info, we go and start the final level in the game, the amusement park. Starting this level off, we begin outside in the amusement park fighting a whole bunch of clowns. The clowns were a lot faster than I expected, as they could just run right by you while hitting you with a quick attack. We then go underground into what looks like a haunted house as we fight skeletons and see coffins littered on every floor. Just like the previous level, there's a lot of up and down movement with many crevices and hidden floors. Finally, after a long struggle, we fight the last and hardest fight in the game, Mysterio. Mysterio is actually pretty tough. He cycles through a couple of attacks which include him having a magical force field which leaves him and hits you, then creating clones of himself that has the same force field that attacks you, and then turning himself into past villains from other levels and using their attacks to cause damage. In order to win this fight, you have to dodge all the force field attacks and then web up Mysterio so you can attack away. After a handful of tries, Mysterio is defeated and he vanishes before we're able to send him to the police. We go and get MJ or Fishbowl, and finally the game is complete. Before I end this video, I have to mention the music. The OST for this game was on a whole nother level. The theme for every level was unique and fit the environment we were playing in. What's funny is that the select level theme where you chose each stage is my favorite theme in the whole game. The music was so well done and really helped add to the atmosphere of each level during my time playing the game. Overall, Spider-Man Mysterio's Menace is a great sequel to Enter Electro even though it's on the Game Boy Advance. The combination of its simplistic story but engaging gameplay make for a quick and satisfying Spider-Man experience. If you still have a Game Boy Advance lying around, then I definitely recommend giving this game a try, as it can be beaten pretty fast. For those reasons, I'm going to give this game a 7.5 out of 10. This title isn't without some minor issues, but it's still worth your time, especially if you're a big Spider-Man fan like myself. Did you play Spider-Man Mysterio's Menace? Did you even know this game existed? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and if you enjoyed the video, feel free to drop a like or subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.